All right. Hello to those who are already here. We'll take just a minute before we get started, give people a chance to roll on in. While we're waiting, I'll give a quick introduction to myself. So I'm Joshua McBride. I am I was a technical solution specialist with KETIV. My particular focus was Tacton and design automation. And of course, worked with the sales team in those product areas. I've now moved over and am a senior application engineer. Once again, same focus as Tacton and CAD and design automation. And so with that too, we are going to be talking about Tacton today. So I want to give a little introduction to that. That is a relatively new product for the United States market. And in fact, we are the only reseller in the United States for Tacton. So what Tacton is on a whole is a configure price quote piece of software. It also has CAD automation with it. That CAD automation can be used in Inventor. It could also be used in SolidWorks. We'll support that automation in either one here. And then there's the CPQ side as well. And one of the key things about it, there's a lot of CPQ software out there. A lot of companies are actually purchasing CPQ and adding it to their ERP systems, things like that. Tacton has always been focused on CPQ. It also has the ability to do visualization and augmented reality with it. And the biggest piece of it is the engine behind it. It's an incredibly powerful engine. It's actually patented. It was developed by in the Swedish Institute of Computer Science. And it's AI engine, really powerful. Won't get into all that, but just a quick introduction, while people are filtering in here. So this presentation is actually going to be given by somebody with Tacton. It's a bit of a unique situation in that they are based over in Europe. So the time difference there is quite significant. So rather than having them get up extremely early in the morning to give this presentation, they've provided a recording for us. So we'll be watching the recording. Of course, I will be here for question and answer at the end to help any of you guys with your questions and so forth. And yeah, I hope you all enjoy it and gain some to get information from it. So we'll go ahead and begin the presentation.
My name is Matthias Reuto, working as a principal solution architect at Tacton, and I've been around for a while. I started in 2013 in kind of the service organization, but nowadays I'm working for the sales engineering department. And kind of my role usually when I'm out talking to customers is talking about how Tacton CPQ fits in the landscape, because that's the thing, right? Tacton CPQ is really good, but it's good at what it's doing. So like the purpose of CPQ can kind of configure pricing and quoting, but then you have so many other systems kind of coming in. And one of the things that I usually talk about is product data management and how you actually get that data into Tacton CPQ and where that is mastered and all these sorts of things, and how you release new products, release new variants, etc. And all right, but let's go over to the product data management part of the presentation. You remember the triangle that was introduced by Patrick last time. He was talking about kind of the foundation, how you create a product. And of course, the product always comes from engineering. You will have all these sorts of engineers that are talking about how you manufacture a product or how you're building up a product, kind of talking about how that specific product is kind of consists in terms of modules and the different parts kind of being interconnected. But that's just a product as per se. kind of go moving forward, you need to kind of start talking about other parts, like how is this going to be actually configurable, or what kind of dynamics do you want to have in your product? And that's when we're starting to talk a little bit about the parts that ties closer into the configuration aspects of things. But before we do that, one of the things that is really important to talk about when we're looking at the product structure is that there will always be one part that is configurable, but then we have multiple other parts that are just kind of tag-alongs, things that are just describing a specific variant. And Patrick was talking about this as parts, e-parts, or engineering parts. It could be other things as well. And kind of that sort of data is something that I'm going to point out that is not necessarily something that we need to have inside of Tacton CPQ. But kind of part of this whole engagement kind of starts up in engineering, kind of always pushes over into the supply management world, and this is where we have the ERP. And kind of most of my sessions that I have with customers just talking about that specific part, because it's not really super clear. We have something that is configurable in Tacton CPQ, and we have something that needs to kind of manufacture that configuration, and this is where it gets interesting. And Patrick was talking about this, that kind of you're releasing your module variants with the different parts from engineering over to supply management, and someone within supply management will start adding other things to it, things that are needed in terms of the manufacturing parts of a product. It could be adding certain things as glue or stuff like that that is just needed to kind of attach different modules together. And when we're kind of addressing this from like the circle of life, at a certain point you want to make this structure configurable. And what you do is that we want to take that structure and we want to add the logic on top of it. And this is where it gets interesting, because once again, the way how Tacton is looking at a configuration problem is not necessarily just talking about that this product fits with that product. It actually explains why things fit together. And I usually go with a pen example, but I'm in a hotel room down in North Carolina as it is right now, and I don't really have a pen. So I took the best thing that I had, and I'm gonna use this ice bucket kind of as an example during this webinar. And I mean, this consists of multiple modules, right? We have the actual bucket, we have the lid, and we have one of those knobs. And this is, of course, something that would be configurable, because you can have different sizes of the ice bucket, and you can have different colors, you can have different materials, and so on. And I'm going to use this so we can talk about things later on when we're kind of addressing the actual data. But of course, there are certain sets of logic here, right? In order for this lid to actually fit on this ice bucket, we need to have the same diameter of the lid as the diameter of the bucket, which is a really simple logic, but of course, that logic will be the same thing, even though that you have a larger bucket or a larger lid. And also, you probably want the color to be the same. I mean, you don't have to, but you probably want to. And that's also one of the constraints. It doesn't connect to any kind of specific color, but it's just saying that you need to have that color the same. Let's go back to that ice bucket in a while. It's not filled with ice, so it's not something that I've used over my stay here. So the next part is like, okay, so we have done the configuration. We have used that set of logic to kind of create some kind of an output. And that output is usually a list of the module variants. The same module variants that we got from engineering, pushed over to sales, and now it's time at a certain point to kind of create that order. And when we create that order, we are using the same module variants. Of course, this can include all different features, different attributes, or other things that could be used later on in the downstreams, like in the ERP system, to kind of decide upon the different routings, etc. But of course, what happens in the ERP system is that you're starting to kind of pull the variants, the ones that was kind of created based on the engineering data with all these kind of manufacturing parts, etc., including that routing, and you create the production bill of materials. So you have an explanation not only not only kind of which kind of component that this consists of, but also the different operations of what should be done in order to get the finished goods out from the manufacturing plant over to the customer. And this is one of the things that kind of we talk about in a lot of our meetings as well. Like, why are we not doing that within Tacton CPQ? Kind of one of the things that, I mean, we certainly could, but I mean, it's still kind of configuration, but it's not really part of a CPQ solution because it's actually part of a downstream system. It's part of that manufacturing process, and the responsible part in this system landscape for any kind of manufacturing is the ERP system, which is where we're looking at this. So kind of looking at this triangle, I love this triangle because this makes it so easy to talk about how the data flows and kind of what kind of data that flows between the different systems, and kind of talking about the initial work that's being done by the engineering and kind of how that is going to be adding some kind of a level of constraints or logic that talks about how things fit together from an engineering perspective. And then that you are pushing that over to sales and start adding other layers on top of it. Layers such as, I don't know if we have anyone from Finland. My wife's from Finland. I don't think the pink is a really kind of popular color in Finland. No offense for anyone, but there could be like a logic that says, if you are selling this to the country of Finland, you shouldn't be able to select pink. All these kind of various local rules could be something that is being added in the sales logic. But on the other hand, looking at the engineering aspects, that has nothing to do with how you're building up the product or how you're engineering the product. It's just a matter of a selection based on a sales constraint. And of course, when we're talking about the supply management or the kind of the ERP aspects of things, I mean, of course, you need to have the routings. You need to have a way to describe how you produce the system. But the most important part, and I think I can't really emphasize enough about this, we need to talk the same language. And this is where the product modeling comes into place, the product modeling that we have inside of Tacton CPQ. So what we're going to do now is that kind of what Patrick ended up talking about is like from a more kind of theoretically perspective, that this is the way how you're kind of building up your product. What I want to do, and like the journey that we're going to take together in this webinar, is to talk about the actual functionality in Tacton CPQ for this. And with that said, kind of what we want to do, I'm just going for an animation. We want to take that structure and we want to push that over to Tacton CPQ. And I mean, this is simple, pretty much simple. But I got a really good question yesterday. But if I have a PLM system, so I don't want to push all the different things from a PLM system over to Tacton CPQ because it doesn't make sense. It's not really everything that is configurable. How do I kind of decide upon what I want to kind of push forward or push over to Tacton CPQ? I mean, all the different positions or items or parts within a PLM system can have attributes. And those attributes can have indications deciding upon, all right, this part should actually be pushed over to CPQ and that as well, but these should not. So we're gonna look at the kind of the APIs that are gonna enable these things. But before we go into the actual details of the APIs, we need to be on a little bit of a more kind of general perspective when we're talking about integrations with Tacton CPQ. I mean, Tacton CPQ is a SaaS solution. And when you have a SaaS solution, you pretty much never have access to the database. You need to have another way to access the data. And accessing the data is usually done through an API. And so is the case with Tacton as well. And every API has their own setup or the way how you're describing data or how you're structuring data, and so does Tacton CPQ. Even though that we have a configurability within our software, it's still going to have pretty much the same pattern or same setup. And that goes with the next part. But how do I get data from a PLM system that is structured in one way over to Tacton CPQ? this is the crucial part. You need to have a hub. You need to have an integration layer, middleware, integration platform, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be the central part of the integration. And I think that every time that I've had a discussion with a customer, there's always someone from IT that will just nod. They will be, okay, yeah, this makes sense. We are trying to do this. We have that as part of our strategy. Every integration that we have within our system landscape should go through that integration layer. And I second that. That's exactly how you want to do it, because what that means is you won't have direct connection between Tacton CPQ administration in this case and the ERP system, which of course allows you to replace the ERP system without kind of even manipulating anything within Tacton CPQ. You can add systems, because I was just pointing out here that ERP and PLM are two of the systems that would be part of this journey that we're talking about here. But there might be other things. I had a discussion with another customer of ours that is using a PIM system for translations. They had a module and asked, can that be part of this whole journey as well? Yes, of course, because essentially this whole integration strategy with the integration layer allows you to add other systems as part of the gathering of the data. And the responsibility, of course, of that integration layer is not only to connect the different system, but it's also to kind of transform and map the data between any other system, and in this case, over to Tacton CPQ administration format. And we support XML and JSON in this. And when we're talking about APIs, kind of essentially when you are making any kind of change within the administration view, you want to use the ticket system. And I assume that everyone that is part of this call knows what a ticket is, but I'm going to anyway kind of repeat that a little bit for you. And a ticket in CPQ admin is a way to take a snapshot or like a branch of the current configuration of the system, including all the different page layouts that we have within each and every object, any kind of pricing, any kind of module structure, assemblies, etc. And that allows you to make modification in an isolated ticket, and no one will be affected by that until you actually release that ticket. The other part that we're going to talk about here is that we're going to talk about the API for product modeling. And that is the API that kind of allows us to handle the structure and the different new modules, etc. But we're going to get a little bit deeper into that in a couple of minutes. The third thing that I'm going to address today is a new API. It's called external channels or data import automation, which is a possibility to kind of bypass that ticketing system. Because at a certain point, kind of one of the strategies with Tacton is that we see the product structure kind of remaining the same with assemblies and the modules, but the module variants are something that usually changes, or it will kind of be additional module variants added to the flow. And by having a data import automation channel allows you to release the data from a PLM system or an article master or ERP system or whatever, and send that directly into the data import automation channel and kind of continuously over to Tacton CPQ. I'm going to show that later on as well. Of course, we have other sets of APIs as well, like master data or price data, product costing, etc. I will not talk about that too much today. I will maybe touch the product costing a little bit, but that's part of the data import automation discussion. Right, so let's start about talking about the ticket management. So ticket management, I mean, of course, we have a CRUD API, like the REST API with the CRUD methodology. So you have a possibility to create, read, update, and delete tickets. Delete is more like transitioning of a ticket, setting that to a state or a status that is achieved or archived or something like that. And of course, you have a possibility to list tickets as well. But kind of part of this journey, when you want to kind of make a modification of the product structure, what you want to do is that you want to create a ticket, do that over the API, and start sending in data. So let's take the step over to what we actually want to talk about here. Is like, how do you get that data into Tacton CPQ? All right, so that means that we need to address the different APIs that exist for the product modeling part. And when we're talking about product modeling is kind of divided between different areas. Kind of the assembly is talking about the structure. Attribute category allows you to kind of categorize certain attributes. Module is, of course, the different kind of puzzle pieces or the different Lego pieces that you're going to use to kind of build up your product. Domains, that's sort of a description of what a specific attribute kind of means. If you have a specific range between two values, so we're talking about a dimension, for example, you can set up a domain that is the dimension of the lid, and that you might want to kind of restrict the size of this. So you can say that this should only be between 0 and 9 inches, or 0 and whatever that is in the metric system. Like, I start to kind of mix up things now because I've been in the States now for 2.5 years. This whole inches and stuff is just getting in my head. But it kind of allows you also to kind of have different selections. So we were talking about colors here previously. The colors would usually be a domain that kind of describes something that has been set as a module variant, a black or a white, whatever kind of color we're talking about. Global feature is a possibility for you to make certain features. Once again, a feature is described by a domain. Kind of having a global feature that would be available across the structure for every module that you have in the system. I think color is a really great example of that. You will probably want to have the color on all the different modules that you have, so you can start kind of playing around with logic that allows you to have equality through the whole setup. Parts and parts feature is something that was mentioned by Patrick, if I remember it correctly. Parts is a possibility for you to be kind of capturing data or kind of including data that is not part of the configuration. But let's kind of dig into all these kind of various APIs and see what we have to play around with. In order for us to start talking about APIs, and I mentioned the CRUD here a couple of minutes ago, every API that we have, kind of the assembly API, the module API, and all these kind of different things, supports CRUD. Create, read, update, and delete. And there's a possibility to kind of either create things in a batch, so creating a list of module variants, or just creating one module variant, or creating a list of assemblies, or just one assembly. And the same goes for read. You can get a list of one of the objects, or you can get one of them, either by looking up an identity or using a name if you don't have the identity in the PLM system, for example. And the next part is, of course, update. Because what happens when you have created something at a certain point, you might want to update a specific, maybe a status on a module variant. You want to use the update functionality to keep the same identity within Tacton CPQ, but you're just updating the status, or update the lead time or something like that. And delete is, of course, a possibility to delete information from Tacton CPQ, either by having a list and kind of do a batch delete, or the same way as for create, kind of, or for read, create delete either one by using the identity or a name. All right, so let's step through these assemblies, or these APIs, starting with assembly. So an assembly in Tacton CPQ kind of describes the structure of the product, and if you remember the triangle when we were taking the structure from the PLM system and was kind of pushing that into Tacton CPQ, it kind of is based out of multiple positions, and the positions can either be other assemblies like sub-assemblies, or it could be modules. And also, when we're talking about assemblies, it's important to know that there are attributes as part of an assembly as well. First of all, you can talk about an assembly as a little bit of a box. You can have certain interfaces between the different assemblies, and the interfaces are usually what we are setting up as attribute. And you can set up something that's called an IO attribute, which means that you will expose the attributes kind of across the different assemblies, or you can make that just attributes that are used for calculations or any other selections on a specific assembly. And the cool part with attributes, and we're not going to address that too much today, but there is a possibility to have aggregation logic on these attributes. So like make every color equal as an example. And of course, the categorization here, there might be multiple attributes that are addressing dimensions, and maybe you would just want to categorize all the dimensions as a specific set of attributes. There is a possibility to create certain logic, or kind of push over certain logic from external systems into Tacton CPQ in the shape of combination tables. Combination tables is pretty much like matrices that describes that a certain set of relations needs to be kind of compatible with each other. I know that we have had a couple of questions from people that have started setting up certain logic within their PLM systems, and they asked us how we can kind of push that into Tacton CPQ. And it's possible through the combination table, because usually in a PLM system you don't have the constraint the constraint type of logic. You usually have friends and foes. What can I work with? What can't I work with, etc. But this is not necessarily something that we super much recommend, because if you remember the triangle that we talked about previously, the triangle is talking about the logic being captured and being maintained within Tacton CPQ. All right, moving forward, we're talking about the module. A module in our world is, of course, kind of how you're describing a specific part of the structure, and that certain part of the structure kind of is built up based on features, different characteristics of that specific modules, and all these kind of features, they have domains, because you need to kind of explain what kind of feature this is, if this is a color, or if this is like an integer dimension or something like that. And we also address the global features here. The global features is something that can exist and can be something that could be available across every module. And of course, the important part is like the modules are just kind of explaining the structure, explaining the way how you describe a module, but you need to have the variants. Those are really important for this whole setup, and the variants is absolutely something that we will send in through the API as well. Moving forward, we were talking about parts previously, and parts that it is possible for you to have certain data that will be used in the downstream system captured within parts in Tacton CPQ. So the parts would be something that you connect to a specific module variant. It's not going to be part of the constraint solver, but it's going to be added as part of the output. So if you have certain things that should just control some kind of a mechanism, maybe kind of turning on and off a leg or something like that in the production bill of material, in the work order, something like that, you can use the parts for stuff like that. So I actually wanted to go through a little bit of a demo, and my plan was to I'm going to move over to one of my friends here, Postman. But first of all, I'm going to log into Tacton CPQ, see if this is logged in. It's not, so I will log in again. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to go into product modeling, the tab down here, and I'm going to look at the assemblies. And I'm going to imagine now that we are creating a partner bike assembly. And we have started doing that in our PLM system. So we started creating the structure. We started to create all the different positions within that specific part assembly. And at a certain point in the product life cycle, you want to kind of send that over to Tacton CPQ. And I don't really have a PLM system set up here, so I'm going to fake this. And I'm going to fake this through using Postman and just send in the structure. So you can see here what I'm doing is that I'm sending in this case, I'm using XML, kind of containing the information about the assembly that I want to build and a list of all the positions that I want this assembly to kind of be built upon. And I'm going to send this in so you can see that. Imagine now that we are in the PLM system. We made the changes. Now we're moving over to the kind of the next state of the life cycle, and we're publishing this over to CPQ. We have created the ticket over the API, and we have now created the assembly. So if I go back now into Tacton CPQ and I will refresh this page, what you can see here is that I've created an assembly, and I will open that up, and it contains all the various positions that kind of makes this bike, like how you build this bike. And that's just the first example. So now we have released the first version of this this product structure. And I think one of the questions that you should ask yourself, like, oh, well, what happens if I want to add a new position? Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm down in North Carolina, and someone told me that during the summer times, around July and August, it's about 105 degrees Fahrenheit down here. So I mean, you need to have multiple bottles. And a client that I was talking to yesterday, they were expressing a need for a beer bottle, kind of a holder for the beer bottle. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to say, okay, let's imagine now that we're once again back in the PLM system, and we have figured out that we wanted to add a second holder. I'm going to go over here. I know that this is a little bit of a TV chef scenario, but I'm going to go into to another sets of data that I have. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to show you what I've done here. So I've added another position. I've added the beer bottle position, and I a little bit sloppy, kind of used the same water bottle. And of course let's go for Miller Lite later on because it's really water. But I'm gonna send this in and do the same thing. So we are in the PLM system. We made this change, and now we're kind of sending this over into Tacton CPQ. But before I do that, I saw that I need to kind of change the identity, because that's one of the things. When you have created this assembly over the API, you should take this identity that comes back from the call of the API, and you should store that as part of the item part within the PLM system, so you can use that for updates later on, and also determine if you want to update something or create something. So I'm going to change that to the identity that I had here, and I'm going to click send. And let's move over to CPQ again to see what happened. You know that we only have the water bottle down here. I'm going to click on the assemblies again and partner assembly, and all of a sudden you actually have a beer bottle down here. That's awesome, right? So that's kind of the way how you would handle these kind of different things. You will just use create to create the structure, and then use put or update to kind of add new stuff to it. And of course, now you can have someone that is working within Tacton CPQ, and probably the engineer in this case, to start adding the different constraints between the positions. But in this webinar, we are not going to focus on that, but that's something that you can do. And the same thing with attributes up here, if you want to create those aggregation sets of logic that kind of create an equal constraint over all the different colors or whatever we want to do. So let's kind of continue with the beer, right? We were saying that we had a beer bottle, but if I go over to this module, I only have a water bottle. And we said that we wanted to add another bottle, but let's go with something that is close to water, but still beer. So let's go over to see how that will look like. So if I look at this one, this is the module that describes the water bottle module. It kind of contains the information about the different features and all the variants, kind of what I was addressing here previously. And if we go down here, I've added a new variant as part of the data. So this variant is my beer bottle, and I was going for let's go with Miller Lite. And let's update this as well. And you can see here that the kind of what I was talking about here previously, you actually have parts of the data can actually be the translated descriptions or the translated sets of data as well. I'm going to click on send, and let's move over to CPQ again and look how that looks like. I'm going to refresh the page. And now we have the Miller Lite bottle as part of the data. So that's kind of the thing. We're separating the data from the logic and from the structure. So pushing over new modules, module variants, or kind of making changes to module variants is something that you can do over the API, and that's through another API, right? It's the module parts of the product model API. So with that said, I mean, I was pointing out that this is one way of doing things, because I also said that if you have set up the structure, why would you use the ticket environment to kind of publish new data if you already kind of provisioned that in an article master, such as a PLM system or an ERP system or something like that? And that's what we want to kind of do next here. So let's go back to the presentation again. And the next part of the presentation is that data import automation that I was talking about, and it's a new functionality that we've added into Tacton CPQ just because we see the importance of having this possibility to kind of release data without having any kind of need for someone to go in and test it out or to provision the data over to Tacton CPQ front end. So when we're talking about data import automation, the way how that works is that you have all these systems that contains data, and every time that they are making a change of the data, we want to push that into a bucket, kind of a database that we call data import automation or external channels. And what happens within that data import automation part is that you would kind of work on the data, structure that, map that to the various modules that we have, and then push it into Tacton CPQ. Another application kind of for this data import automation is, of course, master data in general. So if you have any kind of currency updates or if you have catalog items that you want to kind of push into the system, you can use data import automation for that as well. And also, if you talk about direct costs that are connected to the various module variants, they're usually really tightly connected to the module variants, and therefore they should also be part of this whole workflow. And of course, populate the direct costs that we have in Tacton CPQ as well. But it could be other things as well. I mean, we talked about delivery time. Wait is just another example, or statuses. If you have a scenario like it is today with COVID and all the kind of the shortage of supply in all the different regions, we want to be able to kind of have a possibility to send a status update. So maybe a specific motor is not available, or a specific paint color is not available because you can't really manufacture the paint. That sort of functionality is possible through the data import automation. Another application that I've got a question about multiple times is, okay, imagine now when we have the ETO scenario, we have someone creating a configuration within Tacton CPQ and kind of requesting for an engineer to approve some data. And the approval request will go over to the engineering system. Someone will start looking at this, do all these kind of feasibility studies, and come back with some kind of an item approved. Some of our customers, they want to kind of take a step further and have the ability then to kind of use this channel to start releasing this, because at a certain point here, you will create that item within a PLM system because it needs to be there. And of course, kind of using that to send it over to the data import automation channel is absolutely some really good application for this. And then, of course, send it back into Tacton CPQ. So this is another part of that circle. And I really like this, because this means that we have a possibility to kind of reuse whatever we have introduced as part of the engineering process. I want to run the last demo here and kind of just high level show you how the data import automation looks like within CPQ. So I'm going to move over to my environment again. So accessing the data import automation, it's, as I mentioned, it's not connected to a ticket. So you need to go up to setup and data import automation up here. And the data import automation is set up by multiple channels. You can have one channel for each and every environment that you have connected to your Tacton CPQ administration. You can have one channel for the ticket test environment, and the ticket test environment is what is being run when you're starting a specific ticket as kind of a test environment. You can have the test environment that comes with the Tacton CPQ SaaS solution, and also the production environment. Or you can have one channel that covers them all. That's totally fine. And how this is being treated is like, if you move over here to scripts. Scripts is a way for us to take the data that comes into this channel over the API and start mapping it. And as I mentioned, we have variants, we have direct cost, we got master data objects, etc. But I'm going to focus here on the variants as it is right now. And of course, the first part is to look at, right, should this be included or should it not be included? And if it should be included, which module do we want to include that in? And kind of how this is set up from the start. I mean, I don't think that we have any filters at all here, but this could be certain statuses. It could be different things such as attribute that we want to kind of look at to see if this should be included in CPQ or not. And when we're looking at the part where you kind of map this to a specific module, I'm going to be really lazy in this one and say that I expect the item that comes in over the API to have an attribute that contains the name of the module. But of course, what you can do here is that you can create if and then statements or kind of have other parts of this to kind of handle it. We'll leave over here. And of course, the data is just the data that's going to be sent in. And let's send in some data. So I'm going to use another API, kind of moving towards that external channel. And I'm going to send in another beer bottle. So I'm living in Evanston, which is the location where you have a few spirits. So I'm going to send in a few spirit water bottle into the data import automation. You can see that I have different properties here, and the different properties are, in this case, it's actually mapped to the attributes that I have inside of the module that we're talking about, the vanilla water bottle module. And if I send this in, you can see they created a job down here. And moving back to CPQ, clicking on the data, you can see that now I got the data imported. And if I open this up, you can see that I have all these kind of sets of data that was previously described with a few spirits, etc. And I have something down here with direct costs. I don't have to show that, but it's essentially the same sort of setup. Sending in a specific category, I can do that just for the fun of it. Now I'm taking a cost data. I'm going to use a material cost. And that material cost, and I'm going to do a cost for $40. And you see I got United States dollars. I'm going to send that in. The same kind of job ID theory comes into place, and I will go back here, click on the same variant. Now you can see that I have a material cost here as well. So that allows you to have that connected to the specific module variant. The status is over here. That's just describing the various packages that I've sent in as part of the data. And the next part here that could be a little bit more interesting is like you need to set up some kind of a schedule on when you should release these sets of data over to the production environment or over to the environment that this has been connected to. So I'm adding a schedule here. I'm just going to go for demo, and I need to set a specific time. I'm going to go for whatever time is available here, and I'm going to say that we're just going to do this on Mondays. But of course, you can do that every day if you want to. I need to decide upon which system or which environments to target. In this case, I'm just going to target the ticket test environment, but this could be production environment, the test environments, etc. I can decide upon if I want this to be for a specific product. I only have one product in my setup, but this allows you to have different schedules for different products. I'm going to enable this, and I'm going to click on this product as well. So what happens now when it's going to be a Monday 11:47 is that this is going to be run and it's going to be sent over to the front end environment, and which means that we are bypassing that whole idea of what I was talking about previously. You're bypassing the ticket system, and it makes that available as part of the product model. So you can go in and select this specific variant within the configuration. And this is a really, really nice way of provisioning the data and allow for automation to be updating the product model data in a really smooth way.
All right. Well, just to kind of provide a little bit of a summary and a few other things to that, particularly for those that aren't familiar with Tacton, because this one was kind of deep into it. One of the key things that I hope you get from that is the fact that Tacton can connect to these other systems, such as a PLM system, an ERP system, right? And with the fact that it's got this open API, it doesn't really matter what ERP system or PLM system it is, right? With that API, we can ultimately connect to it and connect those systems. And when talking about, a company and its operations and being efficient, and ultimately this all leading to, the digital transformation, right? The first and main goal of a digital transformation is data availability and connectivity, and having that single stream of data. And that's the key thing to get out of this. That's what Tacton can do. And the other thing with that is, once again, the what Tacton is. Tacton is CPQ, right? That is what it is. It doesn't try to be an ERP system or a PLM system. It is CPQ. And, once again, a lot of these ERP companies and stuff, they are trying to add in CPQ to their systems. But with that, they are an ERP system. CPQ is not their forte. And there's going to be limitations that a lot of these people run into. And that's what we see. They'll run into these limitations, and then they see Tacton, they come to us, and they need to switch because Tacton is a true complete CPQ system, right? And then we just connect to the ERP system. So just some things to kind of keep in mind that, you can get out of this, if you're not familiar with that particular system. So with that, let me share my screen here. And so each week we, have a KETIV Virtual Academy. Next week, we're going to be talking about what's new in Fusion 360 2023. And this is going to be a particularly good one. We do have Brian is going to be hosting that. He's a part of our team, but we're also going to have Autodesk on as well. So they'll be there and available to answer questions and so forth. And in fact, before I get onto that and some other things, were there any questions that anybody had about what they had seen or anything like that? Of course, if you're on YouTube, you can always post those questions. We keep an eye on those, and we can get back to you and answer as well. And with that as well, we're always available. In fact, I'll just go ahead and skip forward to it. We're always available. You can call us. This is actually my direct number. You can call me. I can hook you up with the right people if it's not specifically for, CPQ, Tacton, or design automation. We have many other practices. My email address there as well. You can contact me if you have any questions or anything else that comes up along the way. And with that too, we also have each month a digital manufacturing series, and that is hosted by me. Although this next one, we're actually going to have our man Greston will be presenting on this next one. And he's actually going to be talking about KETIV and the transition we've gone to. We're going to kind of be social vulnerability in a sense, and some honesty, right? Where we've come from, the changes we've made, where we're trying to go, and even some of the areas that we know we need to continue to improve in, and how we plan to do that. So, we've had each month this year, we've had this series going, and this is going to really be the first time we're going to be talking about what we've done and where we're going. So that'll be a really good one. So yeah, once again, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, comments, maybe you just have interest, you can do better, but you're not sure where to start, where to go, contact us, and we will do what we can to help. So thank you all for your time, and hopefully we'll see you next week and in a month on the digital manufacturing series as well.